Are you ready, son?
I'm ready to go.
Hello, welcome to Hard Compound, the American take on Formula One. Just finished watching Baku in Azerbaijan. A race that may have determined the constructor, but certainly not, I don't think, determined the champion for 2022. Patrick, son, I'd like to get your three-word take on Baku.
Baku's always fun. I battled a little bit with my three-word take, but ended up going with more Ferrari failures. We've seen a few times this season the Ferrari team lose critical points due to either pit stop errors or reliability issues, or in some cases driver errors. And once again, both drivers failed to finish the race. Neither one was their fault. It was both reliability issues, but that's big. I mean, you mentioned that this race may have determined the Constructor Championship. Red Bull has now pulled out a massive lead over Ferrari, 80 points, I think. Yep. I mean, that's huge, a third of the way into the season, and looks like Red Bull, figured out their early reliability issues, and Ferrari now is the team that is having trouble scoring points. So this race really did it in for them, it seemed like.
Yeah, this is certainly a tale of two teams. It was the best of times for Red Bull. It was the worst of times for Ferrari. So my three-word take would be did not finish. Red Bull didn't just get maximum points. Max came in first, Checo came in second, and had fastest lap of the day, I believe. Ferrari got 0. Now, Red Bull suffered those DNFs early in the season, so we think they fixed their reliability issues, but it just seems to be getting worse and worse for Ferrari. With what might be the fastest car, they are now, as you said, 80 points down. That's a tough one. And look at the standings now for the championship. Max at 150, Sergio at 129. Charles, he's now in third, 116, despite, really battling race in, race out. It was another pole weekend for Charles, came to nothing. And George in the Mercedes, 99 points. Another DNF for Charles, and George, he came in third place today. He could be in third for the championship. In what we know is, the third best car. That's Ferrari really has to get these reliability issues resolved. And I'm not sure they can. Ferrari seems more notorious for getting less reliable as the season goes on. And we're only, about a third of the way through. So it's not a good day for Ferrari.
Yeah, it's really disappointing for them, disappointing for Leclerc to drop now into third in that drivers' championship race. You could hear how exasperated he was in his sort of post-race interviews, or post-race for him. The race was still going on for most everybody else. But yeah, he's just had some tough luck the last few weeks. DNF in Barcelona, I believe. And then in Monaco, obviously they had sort of a pit screw up, which cost him the lead of that race, and he ended up coming in fourth. And now another reliability issue, and he fails to finish this race. It's been tough sledding for Leclerc the last several races, and you can just tell that that's kind of wearing on him. He knows that every race matters in the championship. We saw that last year with Lewis and Max, and just a couple of maybe errors, even in the early part of the season, can really matter late. And I think, it's starting to wear down Leclerc. And he really seems like, he's got an uphill battle, both in the points and just sort of mentally. It seems really taxing for him.
Yeah, he's currently down 34 points, I believe, which I think there are 14 more races scheduled. So that is absolutely achievable for him to retake the lead. 34 points in 14 races. We never know what's going to happen. Things can get crazy. Got like at Silverstone last year, for example. But, you're right. That's such a grind. He's getting to pole race after race. The Ferrari is faster. He's doing a great job. But then it just keeps dying in the race. That can't keep happening. I think as you mentioned, just sort of the mental strain. Max is maybe the best driver on the grid, and it now seems like he has the best of the fastest cars. And so this could be a season where Charles is going to do everything he can, and it just won't be enough. And that's got to be tough. On the other hand, we never considered Sergio Perez one of the all-time great drivers, but he's been a solid driver his whole career. He now has a darn good car, and he's battling Max week in, week out. I mean, 21 points. That's all that separates Max and Sergio, which is pretty surprising, I think. I think we've gotten used to, all those battles when it was Lewis and Bottas, and Lewis would just sort of stretch the lead. We knew there was nothing Bottas could do other than come in second. But this is still anyone's championship. Even George potentially. But it's great to see Max and Sergio battling on the track. I love that one.
Yeah, for sure. I think Perez can't hold a candle to Max. I don't think he's going to come anywhere close to him when it's all said and done. But he's been really solid. He consistently is coming in right behind Max, or in the case of Monaco, in front of him, which is really good to see. I think, we didn't always feel like Bottas could really challenge Lewis. And I kind of feel the same way about Perez and Verstappen. But he seems like he's doing his best and has really come into his own in the last few races, and he's driving with a lot of confidence, and he looks really good for that team. But I mean, this week, we saw him, we thought he had really good pace. He had a really nice start to the race, beating Leclerc off the line and leading the opening laps. But I think he finished over 20 seconds behind Max, who was just kind of cruising by the end of the race. And, to me, that just shows the gap. Nothing happened to Perez. He had no issues, no pit stop issues or anything like that, and still finished over 20 seconds behind his teammate. He's just not as good, which is fine. I think, we talked about last week which of the top teams had a clear number one, and I think we both agreed that really the only team that had a clear number one was Red Bull, and it is Max Verstappen. But, all credit to Perez for absolutely getting the best out of that car that he can and continuing to push Max forward and to push that team forward. Yeah,
he has done a better job than I expected he would. I still don't think he's in Max's league, similar to you. I think Sergio did suffer a slower pit stop in one of the stops, but for the most part, you're right. There were no issues that could explain away that gap. I do think it shows the talent gap there between Max and Sergio. Another team pairing, though, was shaping up as a shocking, interesting battle for the season. Lewis versus George Russell. George's first year on the team, and once again, he has bested Lewis Hamilton. I find this somewhat surprising. I know, we know George is great. We know Lewis is in the twilight of his career, but this is week in, week out now. A lot of Lewis's hardcore fans really wanted to chalk this up to luck. They kept saying George had good luck, Lewis had bad luck. Some of that you can understand when you watch all the races, but I looked here and it's 99-62. This is a sizable lead already that George Russell has. He's finished in the top 5 every race. He was 3rd today in Baku. And I think this is one of the more interesting stories of the year.
I would agree with you. I think it's been very interesting to watch this play out. I think we both had confidence that George Russell would come in and put more pressure on Hamilton than Bottas had done with his time at Mercedes. But I don't know that either one of us really expected for Russell to come in and sort of immediately outdrive and outperform Hamilton. I think this is the 8th race this season. Hamilton has come ahead of Russell in 1 race so far this season. That's not just luck.
Right.
Russell is outracing Lewis Hamilton. And, I think full credit has to go to George Russell. It's not really a dig at Hamilton at all. I mean, he's a 7-time world champion. It's not like he's a bad driver. But Russell has just come in, figured out this car really quickly, and has put in really solid performances every single week. Hamilton has looked a little bit flustered, not happy with the car, and just really hasn't gotten it under him yet. And I think, maybe as the season goes on, Hamilton starts to figure it out a little bit more and is able to push Russell a little bit more. But so far, it seemed comfortable for George to just come in and start putting in great performances.
Yeah, do you think George will finish with more points this year than Lewis Hamilton?
Under the current circumstances, I would say yes. I think he will. Hamilton hasn't looked like he has in the last decade of his career. Russell has just looked really calm and really solid in that car. It's not the top car this season, which I think is surprising, but he's looked really comfortable with it. Hamilton is not. And, even this week, I think Hamilton put in a pretty good race. And still came in well behind Russell. There's a bit of a weird pit issue that led to that, but I think Russell once again outperformed him, even when Hamilton looked like he was having a pretty solid weekend. So, from that, I just think Russell is gonna maintain that.
Yeah, I think even if they fix the car to address some of the porpoising, the bouncing that Lewis has been complaining about, and as the season goes on, I think Lewis will feel more comfortable with that car. But I've seen enough that, barring some sort of odd circumstances, I think this is. I think George Russell will take the top spot at the Mercedes team. He's outraced Lewis over the season already, and I don't see any reason for that not to continue. I did think it was funny. The guys in AlphaTauri, what were they using? It wasn't duct tape to deal with Yuki's wing, but I thought that was pretty funny. You usually don't see something like that. Those delicate monsters that are F1 cars being duct tape up during a race. That was sort of funny one. And Yuki being told, no more DRS for you the rest of the race, Yuki. I don't think it would have mattered, but it could have. So I just thought that was funny, a funny scene.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, anything to keep the car out there. There's really not much else they can do in that particular situation. So they had to just sort of tape it up or retire the car because the FIA wouldn't let them, keep it out there otherwise. So they said, all right, we're going to tape it and send you on your way and just keep you out there and make sure that we get all the laps in. Unfortunately for Yuki, he ended up way down and way out of the points, where when that issue came up with his rear wing, I think he was maybe 5th or 6th. So he had a really, really good race to that point, and it was just an unfortunate circumstance for him. But, engineers and sort of the pit crew are kind of funny sometimes in the things that they come up with to keep cars out there.
Right. I loved seeing it. I was glad that Yuki got to keep racing. Glad that AlphaTauri got to keep racing. Both him and Gasly. It was funny to watch, and as Yuki was, leaving the pit row, I was thinking, for about 10 seconds, can they do that? But they did, and they let them, and Yuki stayed out there, so that was great. So before we rank our top 10 for Baku, I wanted to give the standings, because every race, you and I each provide our top 10 drivers for the race. And, first gets 10 points, second gets 9 points, 8 points goes to third place, etc. Right now, Max is in the lead with 107 points, George Russell with 100, Charles Leclerc, 95, Sergio Perez, 70, and in fifth, Lando, far behind at 59. I'm going to keep the tally for the whole year, but I don't think this is a surprise. Max, Russell, Charles, Perez, and Lando in the top 5. I think a lot of fans and F1 analysts would be okay with that. But for Baku, who do you have for your top 10?
So I think that's definitely a fair list so far. I think there's only, a couple of guys that prior to the season we would have maybe expected further up that list in the top 5 drivers. But I think so far this season that makes a lot of sense. I guess to keep it going then, my driver of the day today is Max Verstappen. He seemed pretty unstoppable, especially once both Ferraris retired. He showed way more pace than Perez did. Like I mentioned earlier, finished, I think, over 20 seconds ahead of his teammate for the win. Was just, kind of an easy race for him, it seemed like. And Formula One racing is not an easy thing, I don't think. Mm-hmm. And he made it look easy. So
he did.
He's my top driver for today.
Nice.
Then in second, a guy I sort of expected to be doing better this season, but I thought he had a really awesome race this weekend, Pierre Gasly, in an AlphaTauri that sort of had no business really being where it ended up in the top 5. He put it up there. He had great fights with Hamilton for significant portions of that race. with guys like Vettel and Alonso. I thought he did a really nice job getting that AlphaTauri up into the top 5, and getting some really much needed points for that team. They've been struggling this season, and I think Gasly did a really nice job this weekend.
Yep, he did. He's in my top 10. I don't have him that high.
Nice. And then in third, maybe a little bit surprising, I have Charles Leclerc.
Yes.
Over the course of the weekend, he was extremely good, very fast, very consistent. He took pole, didn't get away like he may have wanted to. A little bit of a lockup going into turn 1, but was able to keep Verstappen behind for the whole time he was out there until he came into pit. When he did pit, he was taking massive chunks of time out of both Red Bull drivers. Was a man on a mission, just cruising along. And then once the Red Bulls pit, he stayed out in front and was doing a really nice job until his engine blew up, basically. He absolutely could have challenged for that race win, had the car allowed him to do so. So he was great this weekend, had a really unfortunate car problem that cost him really valuable points.
Yep.
And then my 4 and 5, George Russell and Seb Vettel. Russell, so consistent this season. Another podium for him in what is the third fastest car, like you said. Has just been really solid all season. Another great drive from him. Seb Vettel, I don't think either one of us really expected him to be performing as well as he has this season. He is just dominating Lance Stroll, his teammate, and doing a great job getting lots of points for an Aston Martin team that we weren't really sure was going to challenge for any points at any point this season. So he's been doing a really nice job, and once again, another great weekend for him.
Yeah, that was fun to see Seb out there. For me, I'll do my top 5. Max, as you said, he just was lights out, the best driver this week, this race. No one was going to catch him once Charles lost his power. But yeah, he was just on top of it. My second, Sergio. He had the fastest lap. He had an amazing start. He got out there and took first from Charles. Had just a great start, great first turn. Battled the whole race. He's in a tough position. Everybody is watching Charles. Everybody's watching Carlos. Wants Ferrari to do well. Everyone is watching Max, and Sergio is sometimes sort of the forgotten man, and he just comes in and delivers. So I have him as my number 2. I thought it was a good race for him. Third is Russell. Similarly, it's his first year with Mercedes, and he's besting Lewis Hamilton. It's how much more praise can you give him? And it was another solid race. Admittedly, both Ferraris failed, but he got on podium. My number 4 might surprise you. It's Riccardo. The McLarens were fine this week, but they've not been great cars. Not to our expectations this year. And Ricciardo's underperformed so much that even the team principal, Zach Brown, has publicly said, implied that he won't be back next year. To the point where Daniel had to go before the media and said he planned to be back next year. But he put in a solid race. He battled. He came in, I think it was 8th. And I think when you're in that position, to grab some points does wonders. So I'm going to give 4th place to Ricciardo. 5th, Sebastian Vettel. Great race, in that Aston Martin, which is just consistently so bad. And Baku, you never know what's going to happen. Seb had a great race. My 6 through 10, Alonso, another good weekend for Alonso. He's now been in Formula One, I believe, longer than any other driver, passing Michael Schumacher and more laps than Raikkonen. And just a solid race. Points for the team. Then Hamilton, not great, but a good race. Then Gasly. I had considered moving him up, but these are always tough to rank. Good race from Gasly. Then Riccardo's teammate at McLaren, Norris. He's another one of the better young drivers out there that week in, week out does a great job. And finally, Schumacher. He's had such a poor season. Monaco was just terrible for him. He started the week, I think he was last on the grid at the start. And I didn't know this, but I believe they said this is the only time that's happened in his 2-year career. But, he had a good race. I thought he had a good race, so I thought he deserved 1 point, put him in 10th place.
Nice. Yeah, I think he out-qualified Mazepin basically every time last season and can out-qualify Latifi pretty much always this season. But due to I think that weird red flag in Q1 yesterday really sort of cost him a solid qualifying run, so he wasn't able to put anything good down. But I agree. I think he had a really nice race, and I like him up in the top 10. So my 6 through 10, I have somebody on here that you do not have. That's Yuki Tsunoda. In 6th, I thought he drove really well. The other AlphaTauri, I think he easily could have come in behind Gasly had he not had that rear wing issue. He had been fending off the likes of Vettel and Alonso for a long time, and was just putting in really good laps and looked really solid and pretty calm in there, which, he seems like he gets flustered a lot of the time, but he looked really good battling, some world champions out there, and unfortunately wasn't able to finish in the points because of that issue that basically the FIA told him he had to come in to the pits and fix it, which cost him points, unfortunately. But I thought he had a nice race.
Right, that was what was it, black and orange flag, is it?
Black and orange flag, yeah.
That's a rare one. You're not going to see that out there often.
Yeah, that doesn't happen too frequently. Then I have in 7th, I have Sergio Perez. I thought he did well. He had a hot lap in qualifying, getting on the front row next to Leclerc. Had a really nice start. But then in a car that should have easily skipped away from the Ferrari, Leclerc held on to him. And that basically allowed Leclerc to defend from Max for a significant portion of the time. And then, once Leclerc came in, he was pushing hard and driving much faster than Perez was. And again, failed to keep up with his teammate, Verstappen, for most of that race. So, had a really good sort of early weekend. End of his race, not so great, but ended up in P2. So I guess a solid performance overall. Then in 8th, I have Lewis Hamilton. Pretty good overall, but, still coming in behind Russell. And that's not what we expect from him. We expect him to be on the podium week in and week out. And he just hasn't gotten there this season. I think he had a good race, but took too long getting past certain guys and just, ended up only getting into 4th. And I say only because he probably should be beating Russell more frequently than he is.
Yes.
Then in ninth, I have Alonso. I think he ran a good race overall. He's pretty good at holding people up. He seems like he's been doing that pretty frequently the last few races, and qualifying sessions. I think
right.
a bit of some gamesmanship, more of a dick move than anything on that qualifying this weekend, and costing the likes of Schumacher and Albon a go at getting out of Q1. But he's a wily old vet of the sport, and once again got points for his team, and is consistently getting that Alpine up in pretty good positions. And then in 10th, I have, like you, Daniel Ricciardo. He was just, I think, the better McLaren driver this weekend, which is good to see. I think he really needs to get some momentum, something going. Otherwise, he definitely might be out of McLaren next season. And I think this is a good race to start it at. Just drive better than Norris, get a few points in a race that you were severely down on top speed, and I think he performed really well overall.
Yeah, I do think like you that it was nice to see Ricciardo get some points, drive better than his teammate Lando Norris, but I also still think he's out next year. There are simply too many better drivers, in my opinion, that are available to McLaren. And, folks can say, well, Ricciardo has a contract through 2023. There's so much money now in F1. I mean, these sponsors are dropping tens of millions of dollars that McLaren doesn't need to concern itself with Daniel Ricciardo's contract if they have a better driver. And I think there are multiple better drivers available to McLaren next year. So I think he's out, actually, which will be somewhat sad. He's a good driver. He's been fun to watch. He's a great personality, but I think he's going to be out in 23. And you mentioned, dick moves by Alonso, and I think that's totally true. I have this theory about Alonso. He's just so talented, but he's been, consigned to such middling cars for most of his career. And so he sort of creates challenges for himself because he knows in these cars he can't possibly win. So, like there was that race, I don't remember where it was, but back when McLaren was just was horrible. He basically pushed his car to finish. His car was in such bad shape. He somehow managed to finish the race. Races where, he can hold up Hamilton for lap after lap so his teammate Ocon can win. Or he can hold up, the peloton, we'll call it, in Monaco, because he can, because that's all he can do with the car he has. So he sort of creates these mini challenges, and sometimes they're dick moves. But hey, that's F1. Now, on the podium this week was Max, Sergio, and George Russell. Do you have anyone that belongs on the virtual podium for this week?
I think the virtual podium is a couple of things that I appreciate or admire from this week, and one of them, it's every week pretty much, but I just think camera technology should be on there. It's pretty amazing how many different camera angles we can get in F1. We get visor cams and helmet cams and rear wing cams and all this different stuff. There's cameras everywhere on the car, and they're so small and so light that they don't really affect the drivability or the aerodynamics of the car, because any little thing can put you off in a car like that. And yet we get such good picture quality. It's pretty amazing to me that we're able to see these angles, to see these views, and to get a really good idea of what it is sort of like to be inside one of those cars as it's flying around a track. I think it's really cool to see.
Yeah, that is a good one. We sort of don't appreciate that as much as we should, because visor cam is great. The helmet cam we saw last year a lot. I love it. I watch the races on F1 TV. I watch the practices. I watch the qualifying. And, you can also switch cameras. So you don't have to take, for example, the Sky News feed. I could watch it from Alonso's view, qualifying. Or in practice, I can watch Schumacher from his view and switch it around. We get the great angles from above. We get the great angles at every turn. So that is a great one. I love that. That they definitely belong on the virtual podium. And that's such a good one. I will just quickly add mine, which is Baku. I am from the Motor City and have been following racing all my life. And I don't believe I knew Baku existed until F1 went there. And it just looks like a fun, beautiful city, a great mix of modern and old, a great mix of East and West. And it always produces a fun race. So I'll put Baku on my virtual podium.
That's a very good one, I think. One of my favorite tracks on the calendar, actually, since it got added to the F1 calendar. I really love the races there every year, and it looks like a really awesome city. I would love to, at some point in my life, be able to visit it.
Okay, let's switch to the soft compound, Patrick. We found out that Perez signed with Red Bull through 2024. I think Max has some crazy contract where he's with them through 2026, or maybe it's even 2028. But Red Bull has a solid team locked up through at least 2024. I want to discuss who we think won't be in F1 in 2023. I said Daniel Ricciardo in our previous segment. Is there anyone you think won't be in, who's on the grid currently, who won't be back next year? Or anyone you think where the odds are high? For example, I think the private equity company, Darlington, based in America, that purchased Williams a few years ago, has enough money, and there is enough money in F1, that they no longer need the services of Nicholas Latifi's father, who has been a sponsor, which is why Nicholas Latifi continues to drive for Williams. I think Nicholas Latifi will be out of F1 next year, and I would put the odds at 65%.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you.
It's a binary, but I thought, what the hell? I'll throw some odds in there.
If I had to put odds on it, I would say closer to like 85%. I think there's absolutely no way he comes back next season. He's been so poor. He crashes a lot, costs the team lots of money, doesn't get anything done for him. I just think there's no way that he returns with as many options as there are out there. There's lots of people in the Mercedes Driver Academy and in F2, and there's
Formula
plenty
E.
of drivers that can fill that role. and plenty of drivers that also have sponsors, right? I mean, you don't need that one guy to be, giving you some money. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Nicholas Latifi is the obvious choice. If any of the drivers are not to return next year, I think he's, on the top of that list.
Yeah, I also have, if I were going to say over 50% odds, I would put it at Nicholas Latifi for sure. I also have to say, I think Schumacher. We all hope he does well, and he does okay, but like Latifi, he crashes a lot. He costs his team Haas a lot of money. And, this week is the exception, but it's common for him to finish in the bottom 5 every race. So I would put Schumacher at over 50%, actually, if I were betting on this. I don't have anyone else that I think I could put over 50%, except perhaps Riccardo, as I mentioned before, just slightly over 50%. And then I think there's no one else. It just sort of gets interesting to play the game. So, for example, of all the former champions or current champions, Max, I'm sure he'll be back. I would say odds of him not returning would be something like less than 10%. Alonso has said repeatedly he wants to be back. It looks like Alpine will have him again. So I would have odds of him out of F1 next year at maybe 25%. I think Vettel and Hamilton, I might have to put the odds a little bit higher. They're multiple champions. They don't seem to have quite as much fun as Alonso racing in cars that aren't competing for victories. So, but I think the odds would be, 30 to 40% tops.
Yeah, it's kind of a tough game to play, I think, because there's guys who you think maybe they shouldn't be in F1 anymore. They just haven't been able to prove themselves really, but maybe their dad owns the team, so he's going to stick around.
Right. So I do have Stroll, by the way, still in F1 next year.
Yeah, as do I. But I think I would put it at something like 35% or whatever that he's out. He's just been so poor the last couple of seasons that it's I think it's not out of the realm of possibility to be like, you know what, you've had your fun in F1, kid. I own this team and I need it to do something, so I'm gonna get a driver that can actually compete.
Right, and his father, I think his father would love to sort of cash out because there's a lot of folks and a lot of investment groups sort of checking out F1. They want to be part of it. It's a fast-growing sport. These just shoot up cash week after week after week with seemingly no end in sight. And I suspect Stroll, Lance Stroll's father, Lawrence Stroll, might sell out within a year or two. And if so, I would not expect his son to continue racing in Formula One, given the results to date.
For sure. I mean, it's tough. I think, you look at guys like Vettel and Hamilton, like you were mentioning. I think before the season, I said if Hamilton doesn't win the championship that he's going to retire. So, maybe that actually comes true and he doesn't come back next year. It's hard to predict some of these. I think there's only 20 drivers on the grid, right? And so many of them are so good right now and are working hard to compete in the cars that they have that it's hard to really, say that too many of them are not going to be in F1 next year. So,
speaking of money, Apple Computer, they make so much money, they're willing to spend billions of dollars making content that I'm not sure they care if anyone watches it, as long as it just means the people will continue buying new iPhones every year. There are rumors that Apple has acquired the rights to a Formula One movie about a fictional driver who's in his 40s who returns to the sport, and that the movie will star Brad Pitt and that Lewis Hamilton will be involved in some way, both as a producer and possibly on camera, still playing a driver. Do we care about this? Do we think Apple might buy the rights to Formula One races, streaming rights, for example, that we've heard that Netflix and Amazon may be interested in? Or is it just a story that right now we don't care about?
I don't know. I haven't used Apple products in a few years now, so I don't care about Apple. I think they're just they just scheme to make as much money as they possibly can, which is totally their right to do. But I think a Formula One movie starring Brad Pitt, like, that just seems more like a gimmicky thing to produce a Hollywood type movie. I don't know that it will actually impact the sport a whole lot. It seems like ESPN and Disney are still sort of the main shores of Formula One. So I don't think Apple really will make a play for that. If they do, that would be really disappointing because I would have to get Apple TV or something like that. But.
Well, American tech giants have discovered F1 in the past few years and are dropping millions of dollars to be sponsors. I think the biggest one recently was Oracle, which is now with Red Bull. And so I guess it's probably no surprise that now American media companies have discovered F1. This is, what happens when you get that big, that popular, and you're throwing off that much cash.
Mm-hmm.
Now, red flag. Baku. Excuse me. Last year, Hamilton had an uncharacteristic error that cost him possibly victory at Baku. And that race cost him the championship, those points. Many people say, no, what cost him was a decision by Michael Massey in the final race of the season. I think these are both correct. However, in a new segment I'll call the red flag segment, a sort of Twitter mob demanded that Sky Sports retract a tweet that said, Lewis Hamilton's error at Baku last year cost him the championship. And I was pretty surprised that the mob prevailed. Hamilton, it was an uncharacteristic error, but he screwed up that at Baku last year, and the points would have, that would have given him the championship if you included points from Baku. And it's a long season, so it's always difficult to place blame or praise on one incident or one race or one decision. But I was surprised that the Twitter mob prevailed and got Sky Sports to take that tweet down. Did you have any thoughts on that one, Patrick?
I think mobs are always dumb. So if you're ever in a mob, you're probably being dumb. And I think this is no different. That it's ridiculous to demand that, that Sky Sports delete a tweet that said the points that Hamilton lost. Basically, he gave away those points in this race last year. Cost him the championship, because had he had those points, he would have been victorious, right? That's so straightforward. Like you said, there are lots of things in a long season that lead to either you winning or losing the eventual championship. And that one particular race cost him plenty of points. So, it's just odd to me that people make such a big deal about it. Sky Sports is very pro Hamilton, very pro British drivers. They're not slandering him by any means. They're just saying hey, these points that he lost, unfortunately he couldn't make them up throughout the rest of the season. I don't know. It's funny to me that the mob is just freaking out about this. He's got 7 world championships to his name. He doesn't need you to defend his honor.
Okay, let's do Across the Line. And that is our segment where we predict the top 5 finishers of the next race. The next race will be in Montreal, Canada. I believe because of COVID, it hasn't been there for 2 years. Not since maybe not since 2019. Wow. I believe the last time we were at Montreal, that was the one where Vettel got the penalty and felt he should have won the race, but he was pushed down. I think it was to second place. He had a bit of a hissy fit. He moved the cones around and was not happy, but the results stood. There was no mob defending Sebastian Vettel in Montreal in 2019. But Across the Line, we choose our top 5 for the race. If we choose correctly, we get 1 point. That is, if the driver finishes in the top 5. If the driver finishes in the exact spot we predict, we get 3 points. Once a driver is selected, he is off the board, and the other person, meaning you or me, cannot select him. Do you have the current standings for Across the Line, Patrick?
I do have the current standings for Across the Line. After Monaco, I was ahead 30 points to 24. This week in Baku, you scored 5 points while I only scored 3. So you're gaining on me. It's now 33 to 29 is the current tally.
Oh, that is close. And over the course, there's still many, many races. So I am still in this. Okay, who goes first this week? Is it you or me?
You go first this week.
Nice. So I go first. I do not think that Mercedes will have their issues sorted out. They are forcing their poor drivers to bounce around to the point where they are publicly complaining about muscle and nerve pain. But for Mercedes to fix that, they would have to give up even more performance. I do not think they are ready to do that. So I am not going to have a Mercedes driver in my first spot, Patrick. I am instead going to choose Max. Max is the man on a mission.
Indeed, he is. Not a bad pick. I think Mercedes' problems are only going to get worse before they get better, unfortunately for them.
Ouch.
So I, too, shall not choose a Mercedes driver in my first position. I will instead go for the quick but unreliable team, Ferrari, and take Charles Leclerc.
Oh, nice. I am not expecting their car to die once again, but I always am a little skeptical with Ferrari. Okay, who do you have in second?
In second, that's a good question. I think I will have to go for fast and reliable Sergio Perez.
That is a good one. I am going to go with fast and reliable George Russell for my number 2. I don't expect a double DNF for Ferrari once again, but I do expect a combination of Carlos Sainz's current issues and Ferrari current issues to continue, and so I will not pick Carlos Sainz for third. I'm going to go with George Russell's teammate, Lewis Hamilton.
Nice. That leaves a few options for me. For my third and fourth picks, I think I'm going to go with a few drivers that have been driving well. I think I'm going to have to go with McLaren's Lando Norris and Alpine's Esteban Ocon.
Oh, nice. I will go for fourth and fifth. It was a good race for Alpine this week. It was also a pretty good race for AlphaTauri. So I'm going to go with Yuki in fourth and Alonso in fifth.
Ooh, interesting. Then for my fifth pick, oh wow, this is tough. You know what's a little bit surprising is we haven't taken one of the top 4 drivers, basically. So I'm going to take him, Carlos Sainz.
Nice.
For fifth place.
You have, for Montreal next week, Charles Leclerc, Sergio Perez, Lando Norris, Esteban Ocon, and Carlos Sainz. I have Max Verstappen, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Yuki Tsunoda, and Fernando Alonso. That should be a fun race.
Indeed.
Those are our across-the-line picks. Do you have any crazy predictions for Montreal or the rest of the season?
I think, I don't know how crazy it is, but you mentioned the muscle and nerve pain that the Mercedes drivers are feeling. I think Lewis Hamilton is going to bow out of the Montreal Grand Prix due to severe back pain.
Wow. He's I don't know. He's such a trooper. Then it would have to be terrible. It would have to be so bad where he would go in and demand Toto fix that car. As we mentioned before, the drivers are suffering to maximize performance, and if that's the case, then we're going to see a redesigned Ferrari, or slightly, but performance will definitely suffer going forward. That would be a crazy one, a shocking one certainly. For me, I have 2 shocking ones. I won't really say shocking, but First, my prediction. F1 returning to North America, to lovely Montreal. I believe it will be a race in a downpour, and it will be complete bedlam, and just crazy unexpected results is what I'm going to say. I have a second crazy prediction, and that's not for Montreal, but for this season. Since we badmouthed Nicholas Latifi so much, I wish to continue doing that. And I'm going to predict that in 2022, Nico Hülkenberg will get a point before Nicholas Latifi does.
Oof. Man. Before the Canadians' home Grand Prix finally gets to drive one, and you're going to say he won't get a point before a guy that's literally not in Formula One right now?
Correct. This is true.
Oh, man. Rough.
All right, I want to remind our listeners, send your questions or comments to hardcompoundpod@gmail.com. We may read them on the show. We will definitely read them, and we thank you for them. I also want to thank you for listening to everybody's most beloved Father and Son F1 podcast. And we are Lights Out.
See ya. Thanks for listening.
Awesome, son. Good show. It was a good race. I'm looking forward to Montreal in just a week.
Yeah, Montreal should be good. Damn, that's a quick turnover from Baku all the way to Montreal, man. They got to get all the equipment and cars there. Sheesh.
That will not be easy.